Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about power, loyalty, and the true meaning of courage. It's about a billionaire who had everything money could buy, until the one thing she truly needed couldn't be purchased at all. And it's about a janitor, yes, a quiet, overlooked janitor who stood up in a courtroom and said 5 words that changed everything. I will defend her. Clara Whitmore was known as the Iron Lady of Wall Street. At just 42, she had built a tech empire worth billions. Her company dominated global markets. Her interviews went viral, and her name alone could shift stock prices. To the world, she was untouchable, powerful, unbreakable. But behind closed doors, Clara was exhausted. Success had come at a cost. Her marriage had collapsed years ago. Her friendships were mostly transactional, and the board of directors she once trusted had begun whispering behind her back. When a sudden financial scandal exploded across the media, those whispers turned into knives. One morning, headlines screamed that Clara had orchestrated insider trading and manipulated company funds. News vans crowded outside her mansion. Investors panicked. Employees feared for their jobs. Within 48 hours, the board voted to remove her as CEO pending investigation. The same people who had toasted champagne with her months before now refused to answer her calls. Clara insisted she was innocent. She claimed the financial irregularities were the work of someone inside the company trying to sabotage her. But in the court of public opinion, guilt spread faster than truth. When the trial date was set, Clara hired one of the most expensive legal teams in the country. Her lead attorney, Richard Hale, was famous for winning impossible cases. He charged millions. Clara paid without hesitation. She believed loyalty could be bought. She was wrong. On the morning of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with reporters and spectators. Cameras flashed as Clara entered, dressed in a simple navy suit. She no longer wore the dazzling diamond necklaces that once defined her public image. Today, she looked smaller, somehow not in power, but in spirit. Richard Hale arrived late. He didn't look at her as he sat down. He whispered something to his assistant, then glanced nervously toward the prosecution. The judge entered. The courtroom rose. And then, just as proceedings were about to begin, Richard stood up. Your Honor, he said, clearing his throat, due to unforeseen circumstances and irreconcilable differences with my client, I must withdraw as counsel effective immediately. A wave of gasps filled the room. Clara's heart dropped into her stomach. She turned toward him in disbelief. What are you doing? She whispered. He didn't answer. The judge frowned. Mr. Hale, this is highly irregular. The trial is set to begin. My firm cannot continue representation, he said coldly. We request permission to withdraw. The prosecution smirked. They knew exactly what was happening. Rumors had been swirling that key evidence had surfaced, evidence that might implicate powerful figures beyond Clara, figures who had no intention of being dragged down with her. Judge granted a brief recess. Clara sat frozen at the defense table as her legal team quietly packed their briefcases and walked out. Cameras captured every second. The billionaire who once commanded boardrooms now sat alone in a courtroom, abandoned. And that's when something unexpected happened. From the back of the courtroom, a man in a gray janitor's uniform stepped forward. His name was Daniel Ruiz. For 3 years, Daniel had worked as a night janitor at Clara's company headquarters. He was invisible to most executives. He cleaned their offices, emptied their trash bins, and polished the floors after they went home. Clara had only spoken to him a handful of times, but unlike others, she had always greeted him by name. Daniel wasn't supposed to be there. He had taken the day off to watch the trial from the public gallery. Something in his gut told him Clara was telling the truth. As Clara stared at the empty chair beside her, Daniel felt his chest tighten. He saw not a billionaire, but a human being completely alone. Before he could overthink it, he walked down the aisle. The courtroom fell silent as he approached the defense table. Your Honor. Daniel's voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger. I will defend her. Laughter erupted from some corners of the room. A reporter nearly dropped her pen. The judge adjusted his glasses. Sir, identify yourself. My name is Daniel Ruiz. I work as a janitor at Whitmore Technologies, and you are an attorney. Daniel swallowed. No, Your Honor, but I studied law for 2 years before I had to drop out to support my family. I know enough to know she's being set up. The judge looked skeptical. This is not a theatrical performance. This is a federal trial. Clara turned to Daniel, stunned. Why would you do this? She whispered. Because you once stayed late to help my daughter with her college application, he said quietly. You didn't have to, but you did. You believed in her when no one else did. Now, it's my turn. The courtroom buzzed again, but this time, the laughter faded. The judge called another recess to review the unusual request. Technically, Clara had the right to represent herself or appoint counsel willing to step in, though it was highly discouraged. Clara looked at Daniel. This could ruin you, she said softly. My life was already hard, he replied. At least this way, it means something. After intense discussion, the judge allowed Daniel to act as Clara's legal representative under strict supervision. Many believed it would be a disaster. The prosecution certainly did. When court resumed, Daniel stood at the defense table in his janitor's uniform. The prosecutor began aggressively, presenting documents allegedly proving Clara authorized illegal transactions. Daniel listened carefully, taking handwritten notes. When it was his turn to cross-examine the first witness, the company's CFO, Daniel approached slowly. You testified that Ms. Whitmore personally approved these transfers. Daniel began. Can you confirm the date? The CFO nodded confidently. Daniel held up a printed email log. Isn't it true that on that date, Ms. Whitmore was overseas at a technology summit and that the authorization came from your terminal? The CFO hesitated. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Daniel pressed on. And isn't it also true that you recently received a substantial consulting fee from an offshore account linked to a board member? The prosecutor objected, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Over the next several days, Daniel worked tirelessly. He barely slept. He reviewed financial records, security footage, and internal emails. Clara provided insight into company operations, but Daniel connected dots others had ignored. One night, while examining server logs, Daniel noticed something unusual: remote access. Entries logged at odd hours from a private network registered to one of the board directors during the next session. Daniel presented the evidence. He projected the server logs onto a courtroom screen. These entries, he explained, show unauthorized remote access to the financial system. The IP address traces back not to Ms. Whitmore, but to Director Jonathan Pierce's private residence. Gasps echoed again. Jonathan Pierce shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Daniel continued, his voice steady now. Ms. Whitmore was framed. The illegal transactions were executed using her credentials, but from a separate remote connection. Someone with high-level access orchestrated this. The prosecution scrambled to recover, but their case was unraveling. Then came the turning point. Daniel called an unexpected witness, a junior IT technician who had been fired weeks before the scandal broke. Under oath, the technician testified that he had been instructed by Director Pierce to grant temporary system access for maintenance purposes. He didn't question it at the time, but after the scandal broke, the technician said, I realized something wasn't right. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Clara felt tears welling up, but she held them back. On the final day of trial, Daniel delivered his closing statement. He stood tall, no longer just a janitor in a gray uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, this case isn't about a billionaire trying to escape consequences. It's about betrayal. It's about powerful people thinking they can destroy someone to protect themselves. He paused, letting his words sink in. Ms. Whitmore built a company that gave thousands of people jobs. She invested in communities. She believed in second chances. And today, she's the one who needed one. He looked toward the jury. You saw the evidence. You heard the testimony. This wasn't her crime. It was a calculated attempt to remove her from power. Don't let greed win. The jury deliberated for hours. Clara sat beside Daniel in silence. She no longer saw him as her janitor. She saw him as her shield. Finally, the jury returned. The verdict, not guilty. The courtroom exploded in reaction. Reporters rushed forward. Cameras flashed wildly. Clara covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Jonathan Pierce was immediately taken into custody pending further investigation. As Clara stood outside the courthouse, she faced the media. I was abandoned by people I trusted, she said, but today, I was saved by someone the world overlooks every day. She turned to Daniel. This man is the bravest person I know. In the weeks that followed, Clara was reinstated as CEO, but she didn't return unchanged. Her first announcement shocked the business world. Daniel Ruiz would be awarded a full scholarship to complete his law degree, funded personally by Clara. Upon graduation, he would join the company's legal department. But Daniel shook his head. I don't want a title, he said. I just want fairness. Clara smiled. Then help me build a company that stands for it. Months later, Daniel walked across a university stage, finishing what he once thought was impossible. His daughter cheered from the crowd. Clara sat beside her, applauding proudly. The story of the janitor who defended a billionaire spread worldwide. It became a symbol of courage that sometimes heroes don't wear suits. Sometimes they wear uniforms and carry mop buckets. And every time someone asked Daniel why he stood up that day, he always answered the same way. Because no one deserves to stand alone. So if you ever find yourself thinking you're too small to make a difference, remember this story. The world may overlook you. It may underestimate you. But courage doesn't require permission. All it takes is 5 words. I will defend her.